Hello, this is Yarrow Stark from the Entrepreneur's Journey podcast. Thank you for joining me today. And the guest we have on is only someone I've recently connected with using our voices. We're about to talk to him now. But I've certainly heard his name around the place in many fields, actually. So his name is Clay Collins. Hi, Clay. Thank you for joining me.
Yarrow, I am grateful to be here. Thanks for having me.
So Clay has, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, we'll find this out, but I'm pretty sure he's gone through what you might almost call the traditional life cycle now for an internet marketer, going from, a newbie to information products to now software. He's currently focusing on his LeadBrite company, which does lead pages, which is, I believe, sort of in development at the moment, not a public release.
Nope, it's public release. We're in the cloud. It's a SaaS model. There's 3 different levels. We're live.
Okay, so we're live on Lead Pages. And you probably have seen Lead Player as well, which is his sort of funky opt-in tool for video, which a lot of people like Pat Flynn and Chris Ducker, Mixergy, lots of great podcasts and video guys are talking about and using to collect leads, among other things. So hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about that. But one of the things that Clay was really well known for, sort of prior to becoming a software guy, was pre-selling everything he does. In other words, being able to take customers on before you create what you're going to create, which is obviously a fantastic strategy for launches because you get paid to make what you're going to make. And that's what we're here to talk about. So Clay, let's do this.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I mean, with Lead Player, it's starting to almost become ubiquitous. I mean, David Teitman-Garland from the Rise to the Top is using it. James Schramko is using it for everything he's doing. Pat Flynn is using it for all his videos on smart passive income. And just like, from video blogger to video blogger to video blogger, it's really it's starting to be everywhere. Even if you don't necessarily see that it's Lead Player, in a lot of cases, I don't know that I have the data to say in more cases than not, but in a lot of cases, James Wedmore, it's being used. I'm really happy about that. In terms of pre-selling, I came to this insight a while ago that most people perceive that there are 2 ways to get a product funded. The first way is to self-fund it, right? So you reach into your pockets and into your savings and into this this reserve of cash that in a lot of cases is earmarked for anniversary vacations or your child's college fund or retirement, right? Things you should never touch. And then going into that is one way to fund your business. And a lot of people see that there's a second option, which is raising venture capital or private equity or whatever, but raising investment funds. But I really saw that there was this third way to do it, which was to have your market fund the product. And in a lot of cases, that is actually the better way because it forces you to get your value proposition down from day one. So you get the marketing right, and then you kind of reverse engineer your product based on what your audience said it wanted. And in the same way that it's often the best way to create a product, at least an information product, is to write the sales letter first, and then create the product based on what would sell. It's a really good idea to do that for events, for information products, programs, and also for software. So that's sort of the avenue that I took. There's this third path, and it is audience funded. Kickstarter has explored that in some ways, but I think it's a really kind of limited and shallow way to do it. I think there's a lot more that can be done.
So I think it's pretty clear Clay is very excited about all of this too. Like, and I was telling your voice, Clay, that you live and breathe this. Now, I'd love to know, how did this happen? If it's a personality trait or a sort of a growing up thing. So can we go back in time? So at the moment you've got a lot of experiences. You're running a 7-figure company. You've got 12 staff, and you've pre-sold a whole bunch of different things. So you know how to do it for software, for events, for information products. But how did that all come about? Can we go back to even your first venture? Did you have a lemonade stand as a 12-year-old or something like that?
I did. Actually, I grew up on a citrus nursery. My grandfather was my hero. My grandfather is kind of a remarkable person. He's grown more citrus trees than any person who's ever lived, like ever, on the face of this earth. He started a citrus nursery with my grandmother the day after their 2-day honeymoon. They had $16 in their pockets, and they started doing that. My grandfather hadn't even graduated from high school. He had severe dyslexia. Probably he had dysgraphia, and he probably had ADD, to be honest. But, he spent his entire life perfecting the art of growing a citrus tree. And what I learned from my grandfather, well, two things. The first thing I learned was that something as seemingly simple as growing a citrus tree is something that you could perfect over the course of your entire life. A lot of people think, yeah, you just grow a tree. But he told me that something that is seemingly simple as that could be turned into a process, or something that could be an art form that you could perfect over your entire life. So that was the first thing I learned from him. The second thing that I learned from him was that it's really okay to be you. My grandfather was not a normal person. And my grandfather, basically his existence, showed me that you can simultaneously buck almost every single rule or trend and still be wildly successful. My grandfather used to drive around in jeans and a t-shirt. That's all he wore every single day. He wore like the same clothes. I mean, not the exact same clothes, but it was like he had 12 Fruit of the Loom pocket t-shirts and 12
Homer
Levi
Simpson
jeans.
style.
Yeah, totally. and he drove around in this like beat up like farmer pickup truck. But yet he always had a few $1,000s in his wallet, and he'd drop $100,000 on a ring for my grandmother, when he wanted to. And so he was sort of the inspiration for that. So I grew up on a citrus farm, and my mother had a fruit stand there, and so I squeezed orange juice and sold fresh squeezed orange juice.
How old were you?
And that was my first venture.
How old? And where was this?
I was 8 years old, and this was in rural Southern California.
Okay, and so you had a lot of contact with your grandmother and grandfather. So you were living with them, or were they close by?
I did. So yeah, so we grew up. I grew up on their citrus nursery. They had a bunch of houses there, and just as family wanted to or needed to, they were always allowed to stay rent-free in one of those homes. So my family lived in one of the homes that was that citrus nursery, and my great aunt lived there, and my grandparents lived there, and it was kind of like this family commune. I mean, they were all pretty conservative people, so there wasn't any like hippie elements, but it was kind of an intentional community, and I was surrounded by a bunch of weird agriculturally entrepreneurs, I guess.
The Collins family.
Yeah. I mean, it was the Young family. It was my mom's side of the family,
Okay.
but that's where I grew up, and I was kind of an interesting story about me. You told me you wanted to hear about the journey, but an interesting story about me was I, just sort of the value of doing things your own way. When I was in school, I remember there was this one incident that just kind of caused my mom to make a major change in my education, and that was I won the school spelling bee, but I was failing spelling tests. And the teachers were saying that it was because this was intentional or it was lazy. And it was really because I was dysgraphic. And orally, I could do this stuff, right? But on paper, I couldn't pass the spelling test. My mom said this was total BS. I don't know if we can curse on this show, but she said it was like total BS. You probably don't want the explicit ratings in iTunes, but like it was total BS. And she said, I'm just going to homeschool you. And I think that was another genesis for what happened. I find that people who are educated at home tend to want to work at home later in life, right? Like we're not used to sort of leaving our own environment to go out and do something in this unfamiliar context that's artificially generated to get more productivity out of us. So I was homeschooled, and it's probably no wonder that I work from home now.
How old were you when you were taken out of school?
Man, I was in and out of schools for a while because it just didn't work for me. I think kind of the last homeschooling moment came, I believe it was like fourth grade or so.
Wow. So you're very young.
Yeah, it's pretty young. when I started homeschooling.
Did that affect you socially though? Like, did you miss out on friends and that sort of thing?
Yeah, everyone says that, and it's like in marketing, we're always split testing, right? So like we know what the alternative looks like, and I think when it comes to schooling, everyone assumes that like if you're homeschooled, you're going to end up as this like socially awkward, weird dude who like can't connect with other people. And I didn't find that to be the case at all. Maybe other people will say that I am socially awkward or something, but I still played competitive sports. I still was involved in I was involved with Boy Scouts and so there's still lots of other venues for meeting people. But I think I think the positive side for that for me was that I had an intergenerational community. So when you're in school, you're always packed around a group of people who are in the same age group who are being shuttled from class to class. And to me, that's the awkward social environment. When else in life are you all the time immediately surrounded by people whose age is probably, within 12 months of their birthdays, within 12 months of yours on either side, being told exactly what to do from class to class. I mean, that's probably a prescription for creating a group of people who are meant to work in factories or do what their corporate masters tell them to do.
Right. Hence, the entrepreneur does not like that, and
right.
you had I guess an advantage. Your mom pulled you out, and you no doubt felt different as well from day one, from very early age.
I did feel different, and I was kind of the weird one because I wasn't in school, and I think becoming comfortable with that was one of the most empowering things in the world, because I was used to doing things that other people didn't do, and at first it was kind of weird, and after a while it became empowering. Like when I dropped out of high school, I did later return to high school because I wanted to be around girls, but I went to high school, but I dropped out of high school to start a software company when I was 15, and the reason I did that was, or the reason why I had the courage to do that, is because I was used to being weird. Like I had done this before, and later when I dropped out of graduate school for the second time, like it just wasn't a big deal. It still kind of freaked me out a little bit, but in the scheme of my life, this was not that unusual for me to do.
Clay, I've got the headline for your podcast right now: serial dropout.
Totally.
So you got pulled out of school in primary school, and you go back to high school for the girls, and then you drop out to do software.
Yep.
Can we just jump into these things? So was the software company your first independent venture, separate from your family? Outside of Citrus, I mean.
It was the first venture. I mean, throughout high school, I'm 32 now. I'm in my 30s, my early 30s. But throughout high school, like the World Wide Web had happened, and I discovered that people were willing to pay a lot of money to have websites created. So my best friend at the time, Sean, we started building websites for people, and we'd make a few grand over the course of a weekend, which wasn't bad when you're in high school. What's up?
Were you self-taught with website development, like HTML and so forth?
Yeah. Yep.
So you have a brain that was able to learn that quite easily, or?
I mean, yeah. So I don't. I've never really had my IQ tests. I don't know if I'm above average or below average or whatever. But I will say that another thing that being homeschooled taught me was, or rather didn't teach me, was that there's this artificial line between the learning environment and the home environment, right? A lot of times people go to school and they're like, this is the context in which I learn. And then they go home and they're like, this is the context in which I like play or goof around or eat breakfast or whatever. So there's these separate contexts. And I think that artificial boundary didn't exist for me. So yeah, I learned how to teach myself. I really didn't have a curriculum when I was homeschooled, so it was really self-directed. And yeah, I taught myself HTML. It wasn't that hard to do. But yeah, I was self-taught.
All right, so you're building websites. What happened next?
So after that, I created. I mean, this is the nerdiest story ever. But like, I noticed that our school needed computer lab management software, and I thought that was a really cool opportunity to create some software. And another kid in our school district was writing software. and getting all these accolades from the administration. I was like, I'm smarter than this weird dude who speaks Klingon, and I wanted to build something cool. So I got a copy of Visual Basic from the school. I think when they weren't looking, I just like copied their discs. So I had like this bootleg version of Visual Basic, and I wrote software that eventually my high school used to like operate their lab. So it kept kids from like going to porn sites and from starting applications that they shouldn't start. And it allowed the teacher to shut down everyone's computer. Like if there was chaos in the classroom, she could shut it down. And, it didn't make me very popular, but I mean, no one really cared. It wasn't like, oh, Clay wrote that, now we don't like him. But I mean, it wasn't like the most popular software. Let's just say.
Yeah,
say
well, you're writing software too. That's not exactly a athlete. You're not going to be the popular kid at school because you can code, are you?
That's true. That's true. But I did notice that, like, even at that age, that like girls appreciated like confident guys who were extroverted and willing to put themselves out there. And so that's probably the reason why I left high school, is like I had the girlfriend I wanted and I was like, all right, I'm just going to go now, So I kept the girlfriend and dropped high school.
Wow. You're so determined. Like it sounds like everything just went really well. You found what you want, did it, and then out. And I'm not referring to the girlfriend when I say that, but I mean, it's everything, like I don't like this, I'm out, I'm doing software,
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's keep going.
Okay.
So software for your computer lab leads to Microsoft, right?
Yep. And then so eventually, like, I met the person who created all the software sold all the computers to our school district, and was probably selling more computers to California school districts than anyone else. And his name was Andy Hong, and he was like, wow, you're doing some cool stuff. I've been wanting to start a software company. And
you're like 16, right? Like 15?
Yeah, I'm
15.
15.
You're 15.
I'm
okay.
15.
Right.
Yeah. And he's like, all right, I bet I could raise 120, I bet I could raise about 6 figures in venture capital. This is like in the middle of the whole .com thing, where everyone's business plan was like, we'll create some site and it'll be so popular and we'll charge for advertising, because CPMs were like $15 or something ridiculous back then. And so we raised about 120,000 in venture capital, and I had about 30% of that company, I believe. I had like 49%, and my business partner, had like 51.
What about the venture capitalists?
What'd you say?
What about the venture capitalists? What do they
Oh,
get?
yeah. Shoot. No, okay, so of the part that was remaining, I had 49%, right? So obviously that got diluted.
Right. Okay.
The shares that we had got diluted. So the venture capitalist got a certain percentage of the company, or it was an angel investor, so it wasn't really VC money.
Well, you're 15, right? So it's probably like his dad, right?
No, it was like a business associate.
Okay.
So we did that, and we created like this software called iDialogue, which created like these adaptive surveys. So you could create like survey trees, and you could be like, well, if someone answers something like this, then we'll show them this set of questions. Like it was like branching logic and stuff for surveys. And we started running out of money at some point, and the whole thing failed. Like it failed miserably. We were so close to having a partnership with JD Power and Associates, but like it just didn't work out before our funding ran out, and like it was just like the worst situation. And so at some point I was like, well, screw this, I'm going to go to college.
Okay, so while you were doing that, were you taking a salary but still living at home? Like how does a 15-year-old school dropout working on a startup live?
Yeah, I was making about $3,000 a month, which isn't a ton, but actually it's not actually bad
for a 15-year-old. It's pretty good.
Right. It's not bad for a 15-year-old who had free room and board.
Yeah, and it's not bad for anyone, to be honest. You got no rent, and you can live now on $3,000 a month if you've got no rent. So yeah, it's good for anyone.
Yeah, totally.
Stop complaining.
So I lived with my co-founder in like Orange County, California, and so I just he had a spare room, and I stayed in that. My best friend from high school ended up joining us too, so we all lived together.
Okay, so software company doesn't quite have the result you want. and you go to college. Now, what are you thinking? Is that when you thought, well, I better be traditional now? Or is it, I just want to party? Because it wouldn't surprise me if that was what you were thinking. But
Yeah. Like I really, so I was raised, I'm not Mormon now, but I was raised Mormon, and like I really didn't even know how to party. Like I hadn't had alcohol at that point, really.
well, you knew how to get a
Which is
girlfriend.
unfortunate. Like, man, why didn't someone tell me about how good excellent beer is that early on? Like, it's such a tragedy that like the first beer most people have in college is some crappy beer. Anyway, it was really unfortunate. But no, I didn't party. What I did was I kind of nerded out. So I got to be honest, like I didn't do well in school, and I felt like I could do a lot better. And I think that probably because I have ADD, and I never really cared much. I had this chip on my shoulder. So I was like, well, this is my shot. Like, I want to prove to myself that I'm smart. So I studied way too much in college. In fact, like literally the only regret of my life is studying too hard in college. That's my only regret was that I studied too hard and I didn't goof around enough.
So how did you even get into college? Because you didn't have a high school degree, did you?
No, I actually got into the number one liberal arts college in the United States. I don't know if most people heard of it, but it's called Amherst College, and it's fairly well known. Like the average SAT score is like really high, but I got in there. It was probably marketing back then. Like I had written some academic papers that had gotten published through a job that I had. So I mean, this is so like any other story. There's all these twists and turns. But like in between my freshman and sophomore year of college, I got a job working for an academic research center that was doing a lot of geographic information systems research, so like GIS, and I was their database programmer. And just by virtue of the data I had access to, I was able to team up with some academics and write some papers. And so like I had these papers, I had this entrepreneurial background. I had crappy high school grades, but I had papers published, and I had done well my first year of college. I had good test scores, and I had an interesting like entrepreneurial background. Like not everyone has left high school to start a software company and had papers published and stuff like that. So,
and what course did you choose?
So in college,
it's a degree, right? So what?
Yeah. So I have a degree in psychology.
Okay.
And that was really fun. Although I've learned like a billion times more about psychology from marketing than I have from academic classes, at least about social psychology.
I think everyone would agree with that. That's pretty standard procedure.
Yep.
Okay, so you made it through all of college, 3 years?
It was 4 years.
4 years, and you just studied your butt off. That's
Yep.
Like there wasn't any business projects going there that were significant or anything like that?
Not during college, no.
Okay, so you almost did the one time when most people start a business, you actually studied. That's, once again, unusual, Clay.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that that I was burned, and I didn't realize this until I started a software company like last May. And what I realized was that at 15, I had this dream of starting a software company, and I loved it. I loved it. And it didn't work out. And it didn't work out because we didn't understand product to market fit. We didn't understand direct sales marketing. We didn't understand conversion design. We didn't understand analytics. We didn't understand what gets people to buy. We didn't understand like lean startup methodologies. We didn't understand any marketing, anything, copywriting. And so, I think it's kind of interesting that at some point during graduate school, I started blogging, and then I started pouring myself heavily into marketing. And I think partially that was a reaction to the failure of the very first company that I cared about deeply, and trying to figure out the thing that had hurt us the most with the thing I cared about when I was 15. So, 15 years after I started that company when I was 15, so like around, actually about like about 27 or so, I started just pouring myself into marketing. And I think that was why.
Let's get to that point. So you finished college, and I'm assuming while you were in college, you were just taking a few odd jobs to keep paying the bills and so forth, right? Or living off something else?
Yeah, no, I really didn't. Other than that full-time gig I had doing software development, that only lasted a year because I quit it. But other than that, I really didn't have any jobs in college. It was paid for.
Okay. And then you graduate and you've got a psychology degree. What are you thinking is next?
Yeah, so I went directly. I got a full ride into a PhD program. It was the number one program for, if I can. It's the only academic thing I really have to brag about. But I applied to the number one program for developmental neuropsychology. In the United States at that time, it was at the University of Minnesota. I started a PhD program there. I wanted to study learning disabilities because I'm pretty sure that I have them. And that whole period of my life was all about compensating, right? I wrote these computer programs to help me increase my short-term memory. I wanted to get good grades to just prove to myself that I wasn't stupid. And I wanted to study developmental neuropsychology because I wanted to study learning disabilities so that I could help people create, like cognitive exercise routines to help them overcome their limitations. And I really, hindsight is always 20/20, but what I really believe now is that people should basically ignore their weaknesses and just focus on their strengths. And I think that's where things really started to turn around for me, was when I just stopped trying to fight who I was and stopped trying to compensate and just decided to go for what I was actually good at instead of fighting against, what I was bad at, which is a horrible way to live. It just sucks.
Yeah, there's a book somewhere out there I remember reading about that. Focus on your strengths, not your weaknesses. We have a society that forces people to focus on their weakness, especially during school. You're not good at math, but you're forced to do it. Yep. So does this PhD get complete?
No. So basically, I dropped out almost the first semester. So I've dropped out of graduate school twice. That was round number one, and that first semester, I took a class at a law school just because you got like one discretionary class you could take outside your graduate program. So I took a class in international human rights law. It was being taught by the chairman of the former chairman of the UN Human Rights Subcommission, and I wrote a paper for that class on the human rights of people with no citizenship. So like they're called stateless persons. And he took that paper that I had written and he included it as a chapter in a book he was writing. And I was like, this is total BS. Like, I'm in here and like supposedly at a great school for developmental neuropsychology, and yet I just wrote this paper in this international law class, and now I'm published for international law, even though I'm in this other program. And so shortly after that, that professor who hired me, or who I wrote that paper for, like hired me to be his ghostwriter. And so I ended up, I got a fellowship to study human rights or housing rights in Ghana. So I like moved to Ghana for like a little bit more than a summer and did that. And then he ended up hiring me full time to write a book for him, which is actually, that book is actually published by Oxford University Press. You can look it up. It's called like The Human Rights of Stateless Persons. And
this is a kid who couldn't spell.
Yeah, and couldn't write. Like I was told in high school that I couldn't write, but I just wasn't obsessive enough about it. But like I wrote, I mean, granted, he took some pieces from like other material he had written, but like 75% of that book, like I wrote every word. I'm first in the acknowledgments because I freaking wrote the acknowledgments to the book. And so that was like high school dropout number two or number one. And then the next time I decided I wanted to go to, I wanted to do a dual program in information studies and in human rights because I wanted to, or in law, because I wanted to study sort of like how access to information affects people's demands for human rights. It was something like really obscure and academic like that and dumb.
You're like, this is amazing. For an entrepreneur, you have quite a lot of academic background. Like I can see that part about wanting to prove to yourself that you were smart academically, really took a few years from you here. Like you weren't doing any
Yeah.
businesses at all. So
No,
can we date this? Where are we at? We in early 2000s by now, or
I'm so bad with time.
I think it must be because we're still talking in your early 20s here when you're doing all this, right?
Yeah. So I graduated from college in like 2003. And so 2003. So this is like 2005.
Yeah, you and I are very similar because I'm 33 and I graduated in '03 as well, I think, or '02. So, right.
Cool.
Now, so you let's fast forward a bit. Then we've dropped out of your postgraduate studies twice. So you switched from neuro studies to law, and then now you're switching from law to information systems plus law. That's sounds about right.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is, I mean, and this is so convoluted because I actually dropped out of college once and I transferred one college to the next and then like worked for a year in between then. So there's lots of fits and stuff.
Yeah.
Until I found entrepreneurship, I'd never done the same thing for any length of time. My business I've done from the second I started, that's all I've done for the last, when did I start? Like 2007. So that's all I've done since 2007.
Right.
But yeah, during this period, there's lots of fits and starts.
If anything, Clay, you are a poster child for any parent who's listening to this who's worried about their dyslexic, learning disability student and is going all over the place. You can eventually find what works, eventually, which we haven't even talked about yet, to be honest. So let's get through this. You obviously decide at some point academia is not your path. So how did that transition happen?
So that transition happened. I was in this program and I got both. It was my second graduate school program and I got that one fully funded as well. Plus I was making good money. Interesting story. I hope my employer never finds out. I don't know what the statute of limitations is on this thing, but I had this job working for a digital library that was funded by the government doing like cataloging, like I was cataloging digital assets on the internet. And I actually like outsourced that to India. So I hired someone with like a library degree, like a master's to do my job. So I was making like 40,000 a year or something ridiculous and getting my school paid and my insurance. And like, I wasn't working hardly.
Clay. I think you might be going to jail, but I'm sure they can't get you now.
Yeah.
So what were you doing with your time then and your money?
So, yeah, I mean, so that's when I started blogging. Cause again, I was probably still so burned out on like real business and software.
Wow.
But
that's a long time to be burnt out. That happened when you were 16,
I mean, I'm so
17.
glad I didn't do it. But so I started blogging and I had a personal development blog called The Growing Life. And because everyone thinks they can write about personal development when they start blogging, and that's fine. I don't want to discourage anyone from doing that. But like at my age, with like all, I was a complete screw up, and I thought I had something to say about personal development and productivity. And
well, you have something. You were hiring Indians to do your full-time job. That's pretty productive.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true.
Life hacking.
Exactly. So I start doing that, and so I start blogging, and I started hitting the front page of Dig because I learned that like you could game that to some extent. Like there was a formula, and if you wrote that kind of article and you got enough Dig influencers on your side, you could hit the front page of Dig. And that was when Dig could like drive massive amounts of traffic. And then I realized that there were people who were Dig influencers that you could actually like pay to in quotes promote for you. So I started paying these Dig influencers to get my track. And I was like, well, if this is worth something to me, I bet it'd be worth something to corporations. So I got clients. I probably shouldn't reveal a few of their names. A few of them are pretty successful companies now, but I can name ones that I don't really have relationships anymore. But like Fox Television Studios was one of my clients. And they basically gave me, I was like the middleman. So they'd give me like a few thousand, and then I'd give a few hundred to a Dig influencer to get them on the first page of Dig.
I don't like the evil laugh there.
That was my black hat days.
Yeah.
I don't do that stuff anymore.
How did you get a large company like
I'm
Fox?
a firm believer that you need to know the dark arts. You shouldn't practice them necessarily, but like I really think you should know them. Like even if you're a martial artist, you should know like all the moves that people might do to like kill someone, but you should never do them.
I don't know if you heard me actually because I think it cut out. I was curious how you landed such large clients like Foxtel and not Foxtel, Fox Studios. Especially because you're just this guy who has a website.
Yeah. So, so as a blogger, I started just speaking with other bloggers, and I started speaking with um, just other companies about what I did, because I'll call up anyone, I don't really care. And I was a so one of my clients at the time was this company called like Brazen Careerist, and they've got like a blog network, and they kind of got me to speak at this event in LA for like Hollywood executives, and
Speak about what?
so about new media and social media and what was going on.
Okay, so when was this? Are we talking 07, 08?
It's like
Because if we're talking Diggs' heyday, that would probably be around that time, right?
this is like 2006.
Okay. So
2006, 2007.
when did you start your blog? 05?
No, I think it was 2007. So yeah, it must have been 2007 because it was like right around that time.
Right. So your blog is 06.
No, I think my blog was early 07 and this was late
Well,
07.
Okay. So
Yeah.
we're 07. So we're talking only 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I did that, and so the next logical jump in my entrepreneurial journey was that I realized, well, if they're willing to pay for this, then there must be some actual value to this, and I should be using this for me rather than other people. So I start getting into niche marketing, and I start selling like stuff in the green niche, like compost pails and cordless lawn mowers and chicken coop plans and things like that. So I start selling stuff like that.
So were you following someone's system with this, or were you just, because from blogging to niche marketing is a bit of a switch, right? Because you're not going to sit there and write about all these subjects long term, are you?
Yeah.
So how did you learn that?
I you know what? I was giving everyone money at that time. Like I was buying, like you kind of hear about the buyer, the person who's sort of in that buying mode, and I bought everything. Like I even, I was in StomperNet for like 5 months, which is like $800 a month continuity program. And I was in I was giving everyone money. Like I was buying everyone's ebook. So, there was no specific system I was following per se, but there was a bunch of them, and I was kind of just kludging together my own system for doing this and talking to a lot of people at the same time.
Right, and this is the heyday of launches. So you're talking Traffic Secrets and Butterfly Marketing and Product Launch Formula and StomperNet and Rich Seffrin with the Internet Business Manifesto, and all those things were out around that time.
Yep, totally.
And you bought it all.
Yeah, I bought it all, or
Close to it.
like I had a friend. Like after a while, I realized if you go to these conferences, you can connect with other people, have access to everything. And there was this hard drive being passed around, and like I got access to that hard drive that had everyone's thing on, everyone's stuff on it.
Black hat, yet again.
Yeah, or we'd I'd get together with
We lost you again.
info product.
Sorry, Clay.
What's up?
You just dropped out for a second again. You said you got together with people and.
Yeah, and we'd I'd get like 3 people together and we'd buy someone's $2,000 info product, where the affiliate was making half of that, but we'd buy that. So that was one way that I did it.
Okay, so all this gives you the tools to do niche websites.
Yep.
And did it work?
It did work, yeah. I mean, it didn't. It gave me, I was living that lifestyle business. I had a lifestyle business, which is not where I'm at now. But I was making like $4,000 to $5,000 a month, and not working incredibly hard for it. And I liked that. And so, one of the things about consuming so many information products and watching so many launches is, everyone inevitably, maybe it's a short-term thing or maybe it's a long-term thing, but, you get very used to and you start understanding how people sell information products about how to make money. And I was like, well, I'm making money. And I've paid my dues. And so I'll start showing other people how to do it. So I guess I became an internet marketing guru for a little bit.
Okay, before you taught that, though, where people struggle here is usually first setting up all these niche websites and making money. Was that easy or hard? Like, do you have a lot of failures along the way, or was it fairly all right, did my keyword research, built a niche website with 10 articles in it, Google traffic came, and I sold an affiliate product? Was it like that?
It was, yeah. So it was an affiliate product to some of it was Amazon, some of it was ClickBank. Yeah, it was a pain. It was a pain, and for the beginning I had to subsidize it with selling SEO consulting and all kinds of other things. No, it was nowhere near as easy as other people had made it out to be. It still was pretty wide open in terms of the keywords. Like there weren't so many people competing. Google hadn't come out with like Panda and stuff. And I think probably the trick that kind of helped me out the most was the whole like exact match domain thing. So I realized that if I owned like a .com, .net, .org with like the exact phrase in the right order with like no dashes, that I could rank pretty quickly. So one of my sites was compostpail.net, and that's why I sold compost pails. And that was where I got the bulk of my traffic, was from Google, and it was primarily through just buying up a ton of exact match domain names. I remember at one point I found like the top 10 biggest markets for like attorneys. And it was like New York, San Francisco, Houston, a few, whatever the 10 cities were. And I realized that the way people searched was they searched for the name of the city first and then attorney and lawyer. So I bought like bankruptcy attorney Los Angeles, divorce attorney Los Angeles, like every single variation. I bought like 300 of those. It was ridiculous. And to this day, that was another way I made money, was selling domains, like exact match domains. I'd get them to rank and then I'd sell them. And to this day, I still sell like one of those every once in a while. Like the other day I sold like Los Angeles real estate attorney.com or something like that. And that was for $500. So like this was not like, hey, it's a straightforward, like there wasn't an easy story about how I made income then. Like it was just like a bunch of crap all put together. Most of it was not service based. It was like these little hacks. Like it really wasn't a real, it wasn't a real business in the sense that it was like long term. Like everything was like based on a loophole that I found. It was short term, and I don't know. It wasn't really the best
janky,
time.
I think is the phrase.
It was janky. Yeah. Totally janky.
Okay,
yeah.
So that led to you doing the natural thing. I'm making money. I'll teach people how to make money. And did you have success with that too?
I did. Yeah. I mean, I had a lot of success with that.
As in that became your main business?
Yeah, it did. I mean, I always, throughout the time, I still was doing the stuff that I taught. So, for a while, like I have this domain called businessideas.net. And for a while, that ranked number 3 for the term business ideas, anywhere between position 1 and position 3 for the term business ideas. And that was a really cool domain name because it had like it had so many keywords built into it. It's probably the best in terms of niche marketing. It's probably the best domain that I've ever owned. So like, you've got business ideas. So that's like the top tier key phrase. And then embedded within that, you have like second tier domain names. So you've got like home business ideas and niche business ideas and sports business idea, like all these like second tier ones. Mm-hmm. And then based on that, you've got like all these other kind of like long tail things like hookah bar business ideas. Like seriously, like hookah bar was like, there was this product on how to start your own hookah bar that was like one of our best selling ClickBank products.
Wow.
So and then we had a product for how to become, that was our own product. It was an affiliate thing. It was our own product on how to become a medical transcriptionist. And so we sold that one too. So,
you're basically doing the traditional niche marketing and
Yep.
flipping, like which a lot of people still do today, really, don't they? How did that
Yep.
lead to software, though? Because that's a fairly big transition. So was there some steps in between that, or did you just go, you know what, I'm sick of information publishing? We haven't really talked about your method for pre-launching it either. Did that start developing at this stage?
Yeah, my method for pre-selling started out when I did my very first big launch, and I had a really, blogging is probably the best education I've ever had for how to do copywriting, because I think it's virtually impossible to create a large audience and not know how to write copy and to not have a sense of how to serve them. And so I kind of just went back and forth with them. Like, it's kind of like a tennis match. Like, I wouldn't do anything until they did something. So I'd be like, hey, I'm thinking about making this product. I'm wondering if anyone would be interested in me making a product. And they'd come back and say, like, yes, I'm interested. And I was like, okay, cool. Well, before I release that, just to demonstrate, what would come with this, I'll make a free product for you. What kind of free, if you could have me make any kind of product, what would you be interested in? And they'd tell me what they'd be interested in. And then I'd go back to them and say, all right, I think I know what you're interested in terms of the free product. Here's what I think it is. Is that right? And they'd say, like, yes or no. They'd help me refine it. And then I'd go back to them and be like, all right, it's going to come out on this day. Is there anything else you're looking for? And they'd tell me, and then I'd release it. And then I'd be like, then I'd get testimonials from the free product. And I'd say, all right, based on your feedback on the free thing, here's what I could charge you for. Would you be interested in that? And they'd say, yeah. And I'd be like, all right, and it was long and it would take a while, but it worked incredibly well. The first launch I did, we had a 25% conversion rate from our launch list, which was remarkable. Like, not from my entire list, but from the people who said they were interested in the launch. And it was because I had this it was an interactive launch. And I had people really involved in the story about how the product came to be. And if people think if people think that your product was their idea in the first place, because it really is, then they're much more likely to buy. And if they feel like they're part of the story about how the product came to be, then they will buy.
A sense of ownership. So I'm assuming this is all a spin-off from building your audience through the blog, and you obviously had an email list from that as well, especially as you became a teacher of how to make money online.
Right.
What was that blog again? What was the URL?
Oh, there's a bunch. So,
well, what was Clay Collins known for? Was there I'm Entrepreneur's Journey? Was there a specific site where you got the people you would sell these products to?
Yeah, it was called. God, there were so many versions of it. It was called Project Mojave.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like the Mojave Desert.
Okay, underground, huh?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so that was the first time you tested your system of really working with the people you're going to sell to before you create the product, right?
Correct.
Okay, so take us forward then. So we must be getting close to the present, last 2 years, right?
Yeah, that was more like, it feels like now everything just becomes, it feels like it's been forever, because I've sort of settled down and the huge shifts aren't happening as much. But at that point, I really just start getting more into marketing at that point. So I'm selling like niche stuff, but then at some point I'm done with I call them the lost boys of lifestyle design. So there's a whole generation of people that read Tim Ferriss's book. They don't know what they want out of life. They haven't really figured out their relationship with women or with work. And they just want to get away from it all. And they see, they read the 4-Hour Work Week, and it seems like clever and interesting. And they want to kind of do all these hacks in their life. And so, kind of my clients then were kind of dudes going through existential crises who had no sense of direction in their life and had lost their way. And there's nothing wrong with that. I have been that person, so I'm not criticizing that. But at some point, I started to get a sense of my own identity and what I was good at and what I wasn't. And I realized that, clients with existential crises are kind of the hardest people to serve, because they don't really know what they want in the first place. And manifesto marketing that's all about sort of the rah and quit your job and, all that stuff that, I started evolving as a human being. And I'm not interested in spouting rhetoric anymore or doing revolution marketing, that's all about this, that's all about kind of, that's all sort of rhetoric based. And so I create my first product that's really just kind of a marketing product.
For who? Is it for individuals or for?
Yeah, for information marketers.
Okay.
And it was called the Interactive Offer, and it was all based on case studies. Basically, I had a bunch of private clients that I did this process with, the pre-selling process. One of the first was a woman called Kim West, and so she's at sleeplady.com, and she's sold over 100,000 books on how to get your child to sleep at night. So we did a pre-sell with her, and it did incredibly well, and we started collecting more case studies. And I did my first. I kind of became friends with Jeff Walker, and he's like, yeah, you should he thought it was a good idea for a product, and so I launched that product, and I did pretty well.
That's an obvious connection with his thing, isn't it? It's almost like a sub niche of launches.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
It is, yeah. I mean, So I remember Jeff saying, I can teach people to launch, but I think a lot of people have trouble figuring out what their offer should be. And so that's what my product was in part focused on, how to figure out what your offer should be and then how to launch it.
Did you make millions?
We made seven figures. I don't know that we made 8, but we did okay.
Right. So you're thinking, well, I've made tons of money now, I can retire, right?
No, I mean, I start getting really unsatisfied with a lot of things about. It sounds like I'm a total flake until this point, but
it really does. Like, I feel exhausted, Clay, and we've just gone through your life, really, and wow, there's so many changes, and it's almost like you don't follow through with anything, but there's a few things you're just gifted at that make it work, or you find ways to really, cleverly get a solution, and it works, but nothing really fits right. It's sort of like you're playing around with different things. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm kind of worried about getting in this level of detail. This is the first time that I've really told this full story, and I'm worried that I'm going to come off as a flake. But I think most stories, like I could have told you the marketing version of this story, but I think this is my life. Like, and so I think everyone's life has a bunch of these sort of fits and starts in them.
I think because you're homeschooling as well, like you're, not right. That's unusual. So you were used to change in that regard and not having the standard pattern. So it's probably influenced you throughout your life. But you've been saying, and you can sort of get the thread even throughout this interview, that now you're for the first time in your life doing something that you want to do and stick with, and you've been doing it for a while like that. You feel settled, I think was the phrase you used before.
I do. Yeah.
So can we talk about the transition to that?
Yeah. So even with what I'm doing right now, with software, I still feel like it, this doesn't feel like there's all these things that we can highlight as being shifts. But to me, this is very logical. Like I still have the same blog that I've had for a few years running now. It's at marketingshow.com. And I'm still, I'm creating software that rather than teaching marketing has marketing principles inside of it, right? So like with Lead Pages, I could create a course on how to create landing pages, or I could just create a landing page platform where the templates have best practices built into it.
Well, so, actually, before you talk about that, can you tell us what Lead Player and Lead Pages are, and why did you go after those markets?
Yeah. So Lead Player is a video player that helps people, bloggers, collect leads with video and generate more sales. So it basically allows people to just kind of put an opt-in box anywhere within a video, but it's got I think it has a great deal of sophistication. It remembers who's opted into which list. So if you have 10 different lists, it remembers which of your visitors opted into which lists, and so they don't get asked twice unless the video is for a list they aren't on. It also allows you to globally set calls to action. So you can make it so that, like, let's say you're doing a webinar on a given day, and someone goes and watches a video that you put up a few years ago. Someone, at the end of that video, they can see a call to action for a webinar that you're doing that day. So you can create global calls to action across all the videos on your website. And
why did you come up with this?
I came up with it because I had bought a video player, and I wanted to do this. Like, it was one of the selling points of this kind of competing video player that you could create a call to action easily, and create opt-in boxes. And I got it, and it was like, well, just kidding. Like, you've got to supply your own HTML for the opt-in box, and so you have to custom code that, and it needs to fit inside. Like, you couldn't just be like, all right, here's the text for the opt-in box, boom, and then it would be up.
So it didn't work very well.
It just didn't work. Like, and I wanted something with incredible YouTube integration, because I wanted to both, I wanted to be where the traffic was, which is YouTube, and I wanted people to simultaneously increase their YouTube view count, for everyone who watches the video, which helps you out inside of the YouTube ecosystem. Like, YouTube will send you more traffic if you have more views because it perceives the video as being a popular video. So I wanted to increase my view count, and I still wanted people to get all the benefits of being able to collect leads and get opt-ins on their videos and have these calls to action.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, were you thinking brand new business? Were you thinking drop everything else, I'm going into software? Is that how this happened, or was it more of a gradual rollover?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't.
It's all you do now, right? Predominantly.
We don't sell information products anymore. I was thinking that this is another product that is going to serve my existing audience with the needs that they have from us, which was they had marketing needs. And so, I think people watching externally might think, oh, God, Clay shifted directions, when we're not. It's the same audience. It's the same blog. We're selling a product that helps them accomplish the same thing. But the venue for doing that is a software product as opposed to an information product.
So it's potentially more stable, and you can build a business around that. So it's almost like you're just going deep into something that worked.
Right. I mean, I really feel like, like we didn't shift directions. I feel like we're just going deeper. Like, we're just doing the same thing we did. We're just doing it better. Mm-hmm.
And that led to lead pages as well?
Yeah.
Why are you laughing?
Because honestly, like, I'm questioning in this interview whether I'm doing the right thing. Like, in the sense that at some point there's so much data that I wonder if it's just sort of like it just annoys people. And so I'm wondering if I'm annoying people with sort of how circuitous this path is. But like, if I would have just said something that's simpler and that had a few just kind of key points and, feel good takeaways, I wonder if that would serve people better. As opposed to this sort of very complex, circuitous path that people might not be able to wrap their head around. Like, I just don't know.
We'll find out. We can ask, everyone listening into this, let's get some comments. And if you've listened this far, then obviously you've paid attention and you're enjoying the story. Like, I certainly, am. And I love knowing that, especially the part about homeschooling, and because that's, I think, dictated a lot of the rest of your life and probably almost why you're successful. Because you're a nonconformist and you wouldn't be doing this otherwise. So, and I think that it also allowed you to leverage your dyslexia and learning disabilities to succeed, where in the past you would have been just sort of forced to adapt to it somehow and probably be doing a job you hate right now otherwise. Yeah. So I think it's important because people certainly listening in might be thinking, well, I haven't figured this out yet, and I've been dropping out of everything I do, and nothing fits right. And then it's sort of great to hear that you can find something that does fit, and you can leverage whatever it makes you unique. And entrepreneurship is perfect for this. If there's a style of living a life that suits misfits, it's entrepreneurship. So I hope you're happy to wear the misfit tab. I am. But yeah, so let's wrap it up.
Okay.
Because I think we've reached a current business. I would love to spend an entire hour talking about how you've even grown this, but maybe we don't need that much because, like you said, it's just an extension of your existing business. So you already had an email list, a blog, an audience. You said, I've got this great tool for your videos to help you capture leads. Did you sort of pre-sell that as well, or was it just?
Yeah.
Yep.
We sold both Lead Player and Lead Pages. So, a lot of people have questioned whether or not you could actually do this pre-selling thing. Like, I remember I was interviewed on Mixergy about pre-selling, and a lot of people in that audience sort of are interested in SaaS products. And they were like, yeah, but can you do this with software? And I was like, of course you can do this with software. Like, that to me was a no-brainer. next thing you know, I'm doing this with a SaaS business. So,
So that was before you were doing it with the software.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And did it work from day one? Did you get customers and
Yep.
profitable?
Yeah.
And you've just been growing since then?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, I think you said we have 12 people on our team. It's only 7 people, but
Sorry.
we have 7 full-time in-house people. You know, I guess some of them aren't technically employees. They're like contractors, but they're full-time for us and they don't work for anyone else. And all this is supported by our software. And you know, I'm a huge. I think that one thing, you know, that people might be thinking about when they're hearing this is that kind of in the information product space or the bootstrap space, kind of all these pivots, I guess people call them pivots now because that's trendy, but all these pivots I've gone through seem really unusual, right? But if you look at the software space, very normal. Like it's very, very normal for like someone who does startups, someone in the startup world to have 6 or 7 or 8 businesses before sort of they do that thing that sort of defines them or like becomes their big company. Like, so, you know, in my space that, you know, there's plenty of people who have like, this is their 5th company. And like, that's the one that took off, you know, sort of in sort of the venture-backed software space. That's very traditional because what happens is you get, you know, like you raise, you know, anywhere from 1 to 5 million and, the investor isn't interested in a business that's just going to sustain your life. That's just going to sustain their lifestyle. They want it to either blow up or die. They don't want it to flatline. They want to see how it works. And so someone will get 1 to 5 million in venture capital, and that business will either create hyper growth or it'll flatline or die. And for every business that flatlines or dies, you know, both of those eventually die, and that entrepreneur is on to the next thing, which he hopes will create hyper growth. And even though I didn't know about the asset class that is venture capital, and I didn't understand how to raise it initially, that's always sort of been my emphasis, which is why I've pivoted. I'm only interested in hyper growth. You know, I want to have a business that can eventually be $1 billion business or a business that's worth, you know, that creates multiple hundreds of millions per year in revenue. And so sort of underlying all my pivots is kind of this desire to create hyper growth. And so, you know, when it becomes obvious to me that isn't the track that I'm on, you know, it becomes necessary to adjust in a way that is going to make that more likely. And so I think that's kind of been underlying a lot of, you know, sort of some of the change you've heard about.
Right. And I'm assuming that's the plan forward with what you're currently doing. Is that's the vision for the future?
Yes, absolutely.
Venture capital, growing the revenue, and so on.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Well, I hope you don't feel that you've given too, you know, like a disjointed story here, Clay, because I mean, maybe you should listen to some of the other podcasts because a lot of people have a lot of things in their story that seem like they're a little bit all over the place, but it's not. I think especially having lived it, you no doubt see that one thing logically led to another, and you know, it's an entrepreneur's journey. That's what it is, right?
Totally.
So, what do they say about entrepreneurs? You have to be a lover of ambiguity, of not knowing what's going to happen next. So you can't be that kind of employee mindset where you need the sense of stability because you're not going to get it as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. I heard Steve Blank once say that in his experience, and I was listening to Steve Blank talk with this guy Mark Suster, who's just an amazing venture capitalist, and Steve Blank, who was sort of the mentor for Eric Ries, who wrote the book The Lean Startup. But you know, Steve Blank is actually a pretty famous dude in the startup world in himself. He's a lecturer at Stanford University School of Entrepreneurship and stuff. But Steve Blank was saying that in his own experience and in his experience as a venture capitalist and an investor, almost without fail, entrepreneurs tend to come from very unstable homes. And the reason they're drawn to entrepreneurship is they sort of they thrive in an environment of instability. And when they're not in that place of instability, they often try and create it because it's what they're comfortable with. And some entrepreneurs end up adjusting as their businesses grow, right? Like if they create billion-dollar businesses, they either need to evolve so that they're no longer creating that instability when they get into the growth phase of their company. So they either need to evolve and not create that instability, or they need to hire a professional CEO to come in to create organizations, because otherwise they can completely screw it up trying to recreate their childhood instability so that they can...
They get into drugs.
Yeah, exactly.
Because all that money, you can buy a lot of drugs. So.
Exactly.
All right, Clay, I think that's a great point to wrap up, I think.
Who knows?
Who knows? We've been here for an hour, so it's...
Speaking of chaos, yeah.
Yeah. For people listening in, we've mentioned your site or your software and your service several times, but just to be sure, the best website to go to find out all about LeadPlayer and lead pages and everything like that?
I'd say LeadBrite.com. So LeadBrite, LeadBrite.com.
And that's in particular for anyone who's using video and wants to capture leads, or looking for landing pages to capture leads. You're all about capturing leads. So
I am.
Pretty important role online for anyone doing business. So
totally.
Awesome. Thank you, Clay, for being so open and honest with the whole story. And it'd be interesting if we can get some feedback. Anyone who was listening in to leave some comments on whether you enjoyed his story or anything you want to say. It'd be great. So thanks, Clay.
Cool. Thank you so much, Yara. Appreciate it.
And everyone who's listening in, you know where to go. If you want to get more podcast interviews like this, you can go to entrepreneurs-journey.com or Google my name, which is Yaro, Y-A-R-O, and you'll find my site that way. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.